Welcome everyone to whoever is joining us now. We'll wait a couple, like about 30 or so seconds to get started here with today's live or SciStarter live webinar in a couple weeks. For those of you just joining us, let's see. Okay, I'll keep an eye on that for a second. Welcome, welcome. I'm seeing a bunch of you joining in the participant list. Thanks for joining us. Anyone on Facebook, you're welcome to join us via Zoom. If you sign up during the webinar, you can still witness, and you can also get a recording later if you would like it, if you register. And we'll get started in a moment. It's been a couple weeks for me, but Roland and Trevor were on last week. So it's good to be back, to get myself back into the mode. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started then while everyone is filtering in / watching on Facebook. Welcome everyone to SciStarter Live. We are gonna be talking about Project Sidewalk today in honor of MLK Day coming up on the 16th. So next week, preparing for the Martin Luther King Day of Service as well. So we'll talk through MLK Day and through the project, which I will hand over to John, who is with us, that we'll introduce in a moment here. But as usual, we're going to start with just brief introductions. I am Emma Giles. I'm a program coordinator for SciStarter. I'm usually here as a host, but I haven't been here the last couple weeks as a host. So happy to be back. Roland, would you like to introduce yourself? And then Trevor, I'll help you introduce yourself as well. I know Roland was having some issues with Wi-Fi, so we might have to come back to Roland in a moment here. But just as a brief piece, Roland is the quality assurance coordinator for SciStarter and is usually our IT person on these calls, but because there might be some issues with Wi-Fi, Trevor, if you wouldn't mind stepping in a little bit for that as well. Oh, Roland, there you are. Do you want to introduce yourself really fast?
Hi, sorry, just in time. Thank you for joining, and as usual, I'll be your IT support, posting links.
Excellent. Trevor, you want to introduce yourself? Or not, that's okay. That's okay. You'll have some fun Wi-Fi experiences and Zoom experiences the last couple of weeks, so it'll be good. Awesome. All right, well, we'll go over the basics of Zoom really quickly just to get ourselves oriented. Since this is a webinar, you have both the chat function and the Q&A function at your service. So if you'd like to ask a question or share your commentary, you're welcome to use the chat. If you have questions about citizen science or the project or SciStarter as a whole, or anything about those things that you think would be beneficial to everyone, please put it in the Q&A and we'll be able to get to it in that way. And just to make sure we know how to use the chat function, go ahead and use it right now and just go ahead and send a quick hi, my name is, and where you're coming in from. So I am Emma, zooming in from Phoenix, Arizona. Well, technically Tempe, so Tempe, Arizona. Type that in for you. And then we'll just go ahead and get started as those come in. Okay, there we go. All right, and then we are going to introduce our guest speaker, and then we'll pause for a moment before and come back to John in a moment here. John, do you want to give a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, hello, and I just put my own intro into chat. It's really an honor to be here. I'm a professor in computer science with an affiliateship in our urban design program. I'm also associate director of the UW Create Center. So that's the Center for Research and Education on Accessibility, Technology, and Experiences. And I'm really delighted to be here.
Awesome. So glad to have you here. All right, as usual, we're going to go through a couple of polls to understand who we're talking to today. So if you are on Zoom, it's super helpful to go ahead and answer those polls. The first one would be, have you ever participated in a citizen science project before? If you're not sure, you can hit maybe, although I bet you have. Alrighty, got about 60% of you answering. I'm gonna wait another moment, see if we can get to 80. It's usually my goal. We're like one person away. Okay, that's okay, we don't have to. There we go, awesome. All right, so most of us have, that's awesome. Okay, so we've got 67% of us are yeses and 33% are no's. No maybes though, so at least we're pretty sure about that. That's great. All right, and then our next question, I wanna know, have you ever been to one of these events before, SciStarter Live? Last week, We heard about how two of our fellow SciStarter people, coworkers, got involved in citizen science, Roland and Trevor. Before that, we had a bit of a break, but we talked through satellites and how we can track Santa using NORAD and satellites. And if you've ever been to one of these, we'd love to hear. If not, that would be a no. Oh, we have no's. Well, welcome. Waiting another moment to get a couple more responding. Oh, thanks, Hillary. Yeah, okay, actually, that's a great point. Thank you for saying that. I keep forgetting to mention that. Citizen science is a term, right? And it can be loaded or like has some amount of charge because of the word citizen. So I do want to mention that's the one that SciStarter uses, but it goes by a bunch of different names: community science, neighborhood science. I believe the LA Public Library is one of the ones that uses neighborhood science. So we answer and talk using all of them, but for sake of the SciStarter, like the words that we use specifically, we use citizen science. But yeah, it just depends on what environment you're in and what is preferred by that community. So we'll answer to all of them. Happy to do so. Thanks for making that point, though. It is very helpful. There is another like definition behind community science as well, which is why SciStarter uses citizen science instead of. Alrighty. Okay, so we haven't been to SciStarter Live. I'm so happy to have you here then. Welcome to our webinar. All right, lastly, we just want to know what people we're talking to. So will you answer this question about if you are a citizen scientist yourself, a student, parent, etc.? We would love to know what type of folk we have with us. Awesome. Okay. Got teachers and educators in here. That's great. Cool. And we're not at 100% participation, but I think we're gonna pause it there. Okay, excellent. Yeah, so teachers and educators, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. That's funny. Coming from our guest being a professor, I guess that might make sense. Alrighty, so just as a basic background, as we mentioned, the definition, or rather the term citizen science, there are multiple words for it, so we can use multiple. But I do want to give you all a background of what we mean by citizen science. So this is a collaboration between scientists and those of us who are curious, concerned, and motivated to make a difference. It can be within a community, it can be neighborhood science, etc. It's how people, all types of people, can make an impact on issues they care about and help science. And then the first part of joining into the movement of citizen science, the one we recommend is always to start with SciStarter.org. It is essentially the database of all citizen science projects. We do our best to have as many as humanly possible that exists out there on our sites so that you can find them based on your interests. And these are all searchable using our advanced finder to help you with different, like the grade levels or the age levels that you want to look for, the topics, etc., the where in the world, the online only, etc. And then step number 2, we have training for you. So if you get the citizen science bug and you gain more interest in finding more projects, Foundations of Citizen Science is a training that we provide for free that allows you actually to gain access to other trainings as well. But this one is just the basics to feel a little bit more empowered to be able to make a difference in citizen science and to show off your new knowledge. You get a badge from it too, which for me, I put it on my LinkedIn, so it's connectable to social medias if you'd like. And then we do have these other trainings as well. My personal favorite is the data literacy one. I wish I had used it when I was a 5th grade teacher, for example. It has a lot of amazing information in there to help you feel even more empowered based on a specific topic. Awesome. All right, so why are we here today specifically? We want to prepare for the MLK Day of Service, the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, which is designated by the United States Congress as a National Day of Service. So it's a very special time for all of us to come together and do more to support service projects across the country. If you're from out of the country, you can obviously still participate. It's all about service after all. And many of them are just based online, so you don't even have to go anywhere for them. And Rowan just dropped into the chat a US Department of the Interior link. This one helps with more information about MLK Day if you would like more information. But here is some of that information. So not today, but next week, Martin Luther King Jr., the National Day of Service, is a defining moment in America each year when citizens and residents across the country step up and make communities more equitable and take action to create the beloved community that of Dr. King's dream. So we take action today because we are going to highlight Project Sidewalk to prepare us for next week. So a big keyword here I highlighted here is equitable. I highlight that because that is a big point of how to do service. We want to make sure to have an equitable society, and one of the ways that we tie Project Sidewalk into the Day of Service is specifically because it's about building an equitable environment for everyone. So in the chat as well, Roland, thank you for dropping that. There are more SciStarter opportunities that are actually through the serve.org the AmeriCorps Service Corps and the Points of Light Foundation that you can actually find on that searchable database as well. So if you're looking for more projects, and Project Sidewalk is one of the many, that's another point of access for you to find more opportunities. Great. All right. So that was a lot in a little mini amount of time. So if there are any questions about MLK Day, we will talk a little bit more about it, or John will anyway. I'm going to actually turn it over to John. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my share in a moment here. Before I do that, though, I did want to make a point to say that Project Sidewalk, if you do have a SciStarter account already, it is an affiliate. So you can have access to your data on how often you contribute to this project. So if you were to go to SciStarter.org/project-sidewalk, which is where the project page is, and you hit visit on the left side of the screen, it'll take you to the project. And as long as you use the same email address used for your SciStarter account on your account for Project Sidewalk, that'll allow you to have data contributions sent to your SciStarter account. So you'll know how often you contribute. You can show your service hours, if it counts for service hours for whatever entity you're a part of, etc. So it's super helpful. I know I'll be doing that. And Roland tested it to see, and it tracked immediately. So it's really exciting to see that you get to get automatic credit for doing good things. So awesome way to participate. All right, I'll go ahead and stop my share and let John take over.
Awesome. I'm now sharing my screen. Let me know if can you see it, Emma? Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I also tested out the SciStarter functionality, and it works. So in real time, you can get feedback about the contributions that you're making to our tool. So I'm really honored to be here, especially in service of MLK Jr. and the way in which we're developing societies to be inclusive, and how the built environment excludes people from transit and mobility, which is a fundamental human right. So sidewalks are a critical public infrastructure. At their best, they provide a safe off-road pathway for pedestrians. They help interconnect transit services like bus and rail, and they support commerce and recreation. And for people with disabilities, sidewalks play a crucial role in supporting independence, quality of life, overall physical activity. But the problem is, city streets and sidewalks and businesses are not accessible. I'm showing a famous picture archived at the National Museum of American History, which was taken during the rise of the disability rights movement. It shows a wheelchair user stuck at the edge of a curb. So take note that this is actually a designed environment. We people built this, but it's exclusionary. And it's not just a lack of curb ramps. I'm showing a picture from Manhattan with an intersection without curb ramps. But it's also physical barriers like poles or fire hydrants. Here we have a curb ramp, but it's blocked by a pole. Or sidewalks that just abruptly end. Or things like surface problems. Here we have some degradation due to uprooting. So this tree is essentially growing and pushing up the sidewalk, and it's creating an inaccessible area. And in the worst case, sidewalks can look like this: multiple physical impediments and poor sidewalk design leading to unsafe conditions in inaccessibility. As the UN's New Urban Agenda states, this designed inaccessibility contributes to and further reinforces systemic inequalities in economic opportunity and access to basic health and educational services for people with disabilities. Indeed, it is fitting that we're talking about inequitable infrastructure and exclusionary transit systems on a day to honor Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement in the US. Dr. King's civil rights movement helped lay the groundwork for the disability rights movement, which eventually led to the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990 aimed at creating a more inclusive society for all. But as those pictures demonstrate, and as these articles demonstrate as well, even though it's been 30 years since the passage of the ADA, which requires sidewalks and transit systems to be accessible, cities and governments are failing to meet these requirements. These large-scale sidewalk renovations often only take place in reaction to lawsuits. For example, I'm showing an article from the Los Angeles Times saying that in response to a lawsuit, LA pledged $1.3 billion to fix broken sidewalks and address accessibility problems, estimating that 40% of the city was affected. But the problem is not just a lack of accessible sidewalks, it's also a lack of data. So the National Council on Disability notes that there's no comprehensive information on the degree to which sidewalks are accessible in cities. So this is like unlike when we get in our cars and we just basically assume that we're going to get perfect information about traffic and which roads we can take. There's nothing like that for sidewalks in the United States. In fact, in a recent sample of 178 US cities, Shiloh Dietz and colleagues found that only 20% included sidewalk information and 10% included curb ramps. In a related study, my collaborator Yochai Eisenberg at the University of Illinois, Chicago, conducted a systematic evaluation of ADA. So these are the Americans with Disability Act transition plans in the US. And among these 401 governments, only 13% had ADA transition plans and only 1.7% met the minimum requirements. So in my group, we're trying to pursue a twofold solution. On the first part, we're really focused on data collection. So how can we leverage existing online imagery like streetscape imagery from Google Street View or satellite imagery, along with crowdsourcing and artificial intelligence to help advance data collection on where sidewalks are and their condition? And secondly, how can we create new urban accessibility analytics that leverage this unprecedented data? So for example, in the background, I'm showing a video of a beta version of our tool Access Score, which is parameterizable. So you can give different kinds of weights to measures like where there are curb ramps or surface problems, and then you can get an interactive view of the accessibility of your neighborhood. So our most recent initiative is called Project Sidewalk, and that's what you're going to be playing with today. It has multiple parts. It combines online map imagery, remote crowdsourcing interfaces, which I'll go over in a second, and machine learning to scalably map and assess sidewalks. And then we work with local partners, community advocates, or local governments to help improve urban planning, develop interactive visualization tools, and advance urban analytics. We also use these human labels, the labels that you're going to provide to help train machine learning algorithms to try to do some of this work automatically. So let me show you a quick video. So this is a video of one of the initial versions of our tool, Project Sidewalk, and you see I'm actually moving virtually through a city street scene. This is using Google Street View, and I'm going to be looking for sidewalk problems. So things like surface issues or obstacles in path. So here I'm going to label a surface problem, and I click on the orange surface problem button, and I actually label it with a severity rating and some comments. Here I'm going to be labeling a curb ramp, and then at that same intersection, despite there being a wonderful crosswalk, on the other side, there's a missing curb ramp. We can also label things like obstacles in path, like a fire hydrant or a pole, and missing sidewalks as well. And the key here is that this is completely remote. So anybody, as long as you have a laptop and an internet connection, you can contribute. You don't have to be local to the actual city that you're doing the sidewalk assessments in. And we have two different data collection missions. So the first mission is auditing. It's exactly what we just showed you. You find, label, and assess sidewalks. And the second part, to help improve data quality, is all about validating and correcting other people's labels. So let's take a look at what it would be like as you start to use our tool. We first guide you with an interactive tutorial. So your very first mission is an interactive tutorial. And then we give you a mission on exploring a part of the neighborhood. And the tool looks like this. This is a more recent version of the tool. So you can zoom in and look at different parts of the sidewalk and then actually label it. Here I'm labeling a surface problem, and then I'm going to be labeling missing sidewalk areas. So we have these 7 label types up top. We have statistics about your mission stats over here on the sidebar. We have a mission map in the bottom right-hand corner that helps guide you on where you're supposed to walk and virtually move in the city. And then we have this Google Street View labeling pane. So for example, I want you to imagine now that you're using the tool. What do you see? I guess we could try out the chat function here. So does anyone want to? So Emma says uneven ground. Anyone else?
If it's next to the sidewalk with that, whatever
So yeah,
dirt patch that is, would that count?
Well, this is actually, this was where a tree, if you want to look at the history of this little sidewalk area, so the reason why there's a little uplift here is because there used to be a big tree. And this tree growth actually cracked the sidewalk, leading to a tripping hazard. So yeah, so thank you, Emma. So if we wanted to label this, we would go up and click on surface problem, and then we would drag that label over, we would click it on top of the actual problem type, and then we would do things like rate severity, add some comments, add some tags like cracks and height difference. Here's another example. In this case, we have a pole that's in the middle of the sidewalk, which creates an impassable barrier. And again, we would label it as such. And so in addition to the sort of 7 label types at the top, when you actually start to label something, you're actually also given tags. So things like trees or fire hydrants or parked cars. Okay, now let's go look at the other kinds of missions, which are validating and correcting labels. So here you're actually exploring other people's labels. So what do you see here? And again, you can just use the chat function if you want. So is this an obstacle? It looks like it's a light pole on the sidewalk path. Would you mark agree, disagree, or not sure? Yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree. It is, and it's sort of exacerbated by the presence of the bicycle as well, which is locked up to the light pole. But regardless, it would be an impassable barrier, particularly for somebody in a wheelchair. How about this? I'm showing a picture now of an intersection with a crosswalk that's faded. Is this a missing curb ramp? Indeed, and there's lots of other problems. But to simplify things, we actually just ask you to assess the correctness of one label type at a time. So in this case, we would agree that it's a missing curb ramp. How about this one? Is this surface problem, this patch of grass that's been labeled with the surface problem icon? Yes or no? And see, this is where it starts to get tricky and subjective. And the reason why AI algorithms are not particularly good at yet assessing a built environment automatically. So this is not on the pedestrian pathway. So we would actually mark this as a disagree. So this was a human error, and that happens. As another example, hopefully you could see this even though it's shady. But is this a surface problem? In fact, it is. It's very significant. From one direction, you literally would not be able to overcome that big uplift there. And then this is the final one I have. What do you think about this one? Is this pole actually presenting an obstacle to somebody who's in a wheelchair or using a mobility aid? And again, this one is a disagree. This is actually a common mistake that people have. So when they see that we want people to label poles, they just start to label every single pole. But we only want you to label the poles that are problems, that present accessibility barriers. So a good way to think about this is just the complexity of a street scene, right? And all the things that are going on here. And urban designers are supposed to create a pedestrian zone that is free of obstruction. So that's what we want you to focus on. We don't want you to necessarily focus on where there's planting and furnishing or other things on the right side. But is there a pedestrian zone that would be accessible for somebody who's in a wheelchair? And we also try to make Project Sidewalk fun and educational. Yeah, there is a size threshold. It certainly should be 4 feet wide to help support people in wheelchairs with navigation. But that is one of the subjective qualities that's a bit hard to do with our tool. So thank you. We don't actually have any measurement tools in Project Sidewalk. So you just have to, there is a narrow tag. So if you perceive it to be too narrow, then you can mark the narrow tag. So there's, in addition to the SciStarter stuff, we also have our own dashboard. So you can look at badges that you earn and other kinds of reward achievements. And then we also have a leaderboard. So we started this project back in 2016, and we initially launched in Washington, D.C. So this was our pilot, and we had 1,400 users participate. They provided over 260,000 labels with 92% accuracy. And the image shows some of the top-down view of all the labels that we collected. But what's interesting is we can move towards doing these really complex urban analytics centered on access and the sidewalks. So here we have a street accessibility score visualization, which takes that data and color codes it based on how accessible it is. Or a different kind of visualization is a point visualization. Here, the lighter areas represent higher label counts. And so with these visualizations, spatial patterns of sidewalk obstacles begin to emerge. So for example, you might be attracted to these 2 salient areas where it's very bright, and meaning that there's a lot of obstacle labels. So let's dig into this a little bit. A different way of looking at this is actually merging all the problems together. So like surface problems and obstacles together and creating what's called a heat map visualization. And here, I think those bright spots stand out even more, right? And so we can start to dive into this a little bit. And over here, we have Anacostia. And if you're familiar with Washington, D.C. area, a place that I used to live and love, this area, Anacostia, is a lower socioeconomic area that's 92% Black. And our findings suggest has poor pedestrian accessibility. Interestingly, another bright spot corresponds to Georgetown, which is a highly affluent area that is 82% white, but has historic infrastructure like cobblestone pathways and perhaps preservation policies that negatively impact accessibility. So I think this really shows the power of data-driven accessibility analytics using Project Sidewalk data. And as a core ethos, all the data that we collect and our tools themselves are completely open source. So anyone can build on the data that we're collecting. In fact, others have. So I'm showing an article about a developer who built an interactive tool visualizing the sidewalk accessibility data in DC. And so since our pilot deployment, we've actually been working with local partners in 10 cities in North America. And recently, we've also started to collaborate with people outside of North America in Amsterdam and Zurich. And I just want to emphasize that people's efforts, community scientists' efforts, are making a difference. We're transforming policy, we're informing urban design, we're creating better, more equitable transit networks. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples. So one of our initial deployments after Washington, D.C. was in a community called Newberg, Oregon, which is about an hour outside of Portland, Oregon. And here we work directly with local government and community advocates on mapping and assessing their sidewalks. And over 230 users participated, completely mapping and assessing 187 kilometers of streets. And as a result of this data, the Newburgh City Council established new sidewalk renovation programs to help people improve the access of their sidewalks. In Oradell, New Jersey, we partnered with local Girl Scout troops and the local chapter of the National MS Society, as well as Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine. And here's all the data that we've collected. Here, again, over 200 users participated, contributing 12,000 labels and 19,000 validations. What's really interesting about Oradell is that if you took all the surface problems that we found and all the missing sidewalks that we found, and you mashed them together, you would essentially have the full street network of Oradell. So that means essentially that they have high areas with missing sidewalks, and then those sidewalks that they do have tend to be inaccessible. We also did a tag analysis. So remember, when you label something, you actually can add tags. We found that over 29% of the surface problem tags were height differences. So I'm showing an example of what that looks like. And in fact, over 110 instances were highly severe. So I'm showing various examples of that. So they have the growth from these trees that are sort of overrunning the sidewalks and creating these inaccessible barriers. Another example comes from Mexico, and here we partnered with an NGO called Liga Peatonal, and they're dedicated to improving the walkability, accessibility, and pedestrian safety in Mexican cities. They've helped us translate our interfaces into Spanish, and they've also helped with training materials and creating new videos and other things to help people understand how our tools can be used in Mexico. So here's somebody is auditing in Mexico City. You see they're adding labels for the crosswalk, missing curb ramps, and they're about to take a step forward. And here we have a curb ramp, but then there's also this stone or the large rock that is impeding access. So that's also being labeled. And a note from the local government there about Project Sidewalk. Project Sidewalk provides us with data that is essential to improving San Pedro's urban accessibility. With Project Sidewalk, we know the main problems to be solved, how many problems there are, and their location. And these results will be used to inform a new pedestrian master plan. So here's the data that we've collected in one of our communities called San Pedro, Mexico, which is in the northern part of Mexico. And here, citizen scientists or community scientists audited nearly 1,300 kilometers of streets, providing over 100,000 labels. And again, we can dive in because we're collecting images of all this. We can actually look at the visuals and ascertain what are some of the patterns. So here I'm showing all the curb ramps that, or some of the curb ramps that have been marked as severity rating 5. So these are curb ramps that exist to try to help people go into the street seams, but you can see that they're not accessible. So they're like too narrow, they have obstacles, they're too steep, or they just have poor design. And interestingly, we can also then compare this. So we can see, well, what do poor curb ramps look like in the city of Seattle, where I live, compared with what they look like in Mexico City? And again, we can do visual analysis as well as quantitative analysis. And I was grateful to see that Liga Peatonal was able to publish some of their work for the United Nations. So if you're interested in contributing, you can go to projectsidewalk.org and click sign in, which is over on the right side. It's that yellow button. And then that'll pop up a little dialogue like this, and it asks you to sign up. And when you click sign up, I just want to encourage you to use the same email that you've used to sign up on SciStarter. And when you use the same email, then they automatically interchange. So the data that you collect in Project Sidewalk, you'll get credit for it on SciStarter. And then the other part is you can select the city. So if you want to tour around Amsterdam and audit their environment, you can do that. You can go into Mexico, you can go into Chicago, you can go into any of our partner cities. And then you can click Start Exploring. So if this is something that's really of interest to you, I encourage you to follow us on Twitter, where we provide updates on the work that we're doing. And then we've also have a Slack. So this is a communication tool that a lot of people use. It's similar to Microsoft Teams. And I've put in a link to that. You can also just take a quick screenshot and use the QR code there, and it'll bring you over to our Slack. This is a great place to just like ask us questions, the team questions about like various things that you found, like, oh, do you consider this to be a barrier or a problem? And we can have a discussion about that. And then I'm just wrapping up here, just grateful for the students who've worked on this project, for graduate students, undergraduate students, and even high school students have contributed. Also, all of our partners from Liga Peatonal to the City of Amsterdam to our colleagues at the University of Illinois Chicago, and then our various funding sources, primarily the National Science Foundation, has been absolutely essential to this. So again, go to projectsidewalk.org and to contribute and have fun with it. So now I'll take questions, and I'm also happy, Emma, for example, to do a live demo if you think that would be useful.
I do think that would be so useful. We definitely have time to do that. I would like to pause for questions if there are any, just in case if we move forward and there's someone who forgets. I know Roland and I had a very similar question to each other. It's not available in Phoenix at this point where I live. I'm just curious, like, what is the process for getting more cities, or is there capacity type concerns and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've kind of grown organically. This was a research project that started at the University of Maryland when I was a professor there. And what we've found through experience, working with our now 12 partner cities, is that the number one thing that's important to us is need. So some cities are doing a lot of their own data collection. Most are not, as I demonstrated by some of the statistics that I provided. But the number one thing is we want to make sure that there is a need in the city. Secondly, we're really looking for cities that have strong community advocacy. So even though it's easy to use our tool, it still requires work. For a lot of the examples I showed, we're talking about hundreds of people that are contributing, and they can do so from their couch. They don't have to actually go out and do the walkability audit that you might do traditionally, but it still takes work. And so we look towards community advocacy and sort of community building around it. And so those are the two really important ingredients. Does the city need our data? And what kind of community advocacy exists? And it's actually a lot of fun because we work directly like we did with the Girl Scouts in New Jersey, and those partnerships work very well. We're also very open and interested in working directly with schools, middle schools and high schools through service learning, so that students can learn about urban design, equitability, and how we build cities and how it can affect us. I think it's really great. We're kind of growing that arm of our work around service learning. So again, I'm very honored to be part of the SciStarter, because I think it's in that same vision. So yeah, great questions. Any other questions?
I'm going to check the Q&A just in case. I think we might be okay to go to there's a lot of just praise in the chat too. So I think you have a lot to be proud of. So thank you so much. All this detail too, and how it's all been going, and the reactions and the implications after a city has been mapped. It's truly incredible work. So thank you.
Thank you.
And it would, actually, if you would like to do a live demonstration, I think that'd be super, super duper helpful.
Yeah, great. So I will do so. I'm also going to try to open up my SciStarter. I'm going to click on the link that Roland shared, which was Project Sidewalk, and I will share my screen again. Hopefully my internet plays well.
There you go.
So I'm sharing my screen. Oh, thanks, Roland. Let's see. So, and then there's also a way to get to your dashboard, right? So I'll just go to main dashboard. So I'm on the SciStarter tool. Probably a good place. Oh, I have to log in. There we go. And remember, the email that I'm using here is the same email that I've used on Project Sidewalk. So you don't have to be registered with SciStarter, but this obviously is a SciStarter event. And I think SciStarter is a great program to learn about a variety of ways that you can participate in service. So I highly recommend it. So you can go onto SciStarter and sign up for an account if you haven't already. And you can see I have 79 contributions. And that's coming solely from my work on Project Sidewalk. So I'm going to do some Project Sidewalk work, and then I'll tab over to the SciStarter dashboard to sort of show you how that works. So let's go back to Project Sidewalk. So we can be in Chicago. I'll put the Chicago link in here. We're working directly with a variety of municipalities in Chicago, as well as partners. So it's a great test bed for us. It's a huge city. Click on the link, and then if you will, you can do sign in and sign up. Which takes a moment, I realize. So you can do that. And I already have an account. So there we are. And I think the easiest thing maybe is to start maybe by doing some validations. So I clicked on the Start Validating button. And basically, I'm given a mission. And here, in this case, it says validate 10 surface problem labels. So this is similar to what we did in my talk. And it tells you a little bit about what a surface problem is, and it shows you an example. And then we also give you some do's and do nots. So for example, here, it's the wrong label because this actually isn't a surface problem, right? So let's look at the next one. And again, this is the wrong label because this surface problem is not on the pedestrian path. And we want you to evaluate not the roadway unless the roadway is part of the pedestrian path. So if this were in a crosswalk, then most certainly label it. But in this case, it's not on the sidewalk. It's not on a pedestrian path. So we would mark the wrong label. So you can start your mission. And again, now we're actually doing the work. And I would say the same thing for this. So you can kind of look around. And here we have a dirt road. And it's unlikely that this is a pedestrian pathway, or at least designed to be a pedestrian pathway. So I would write disagree. And I might even write in a comment that says something like, this is a road and not a pedestrian pathway. And then the person who used that label can actually get my feedback. So they can learn about how to be better, about how they're auditing the environment. And here, this is a problem. So you can even mouse over the label and you can see the tags say cracks, grass, and very broken. And so I would agree with this. It's actually been mowed recently, but this is only getting worse over time and does certainly present a tripping hazard. So I would mark agree. Again, this is all overgrowth. So I can mark agree. I can also hit the A key if I want to go really fast. I can hit A to agree and D to disagree. And you could probably do 100 of these in 5 minutes. And then this one is a little bit hard to see, so I would say not sure. Here we have some cracks. So I'd hit agree. So that's just the validation part. If you want to do the actual labeling exercise, you would hit start exploring. So here, I'm now doing the exploration part. And basically, one thing to remind yourself of is unlike streets, there's like sidewalks on both sides, or ideally there would be. And so you want to look both ways. So here, there's an issue with a surface problem. So I would mark this as surface problem. I probably mark this as a 2. So where 1 is like most passable and 5 is least passable. And then I would probably mark cracks and grass. And I noticed there's a few other issues. So same kind of issue here. So probably maybe a 1 and cracks and grass. And just do your best with the ratings, because we have multiple people doing this and we kind of collate everything together. So just do your very best. So here again, we have cracks, a bit of an uplift. So I put height difference. And grass again. And then with the shadows, it's a little harder to see. So I'll put cracks and grass. And then you could take, once you've looked kind of and evaluated that area, you can take a step forward. And notice how the cars here are kind of in the way. So we would put can't see the sidewalk. Right? And again, I want to look at both sides of the road. So sometimes people mark these residential walkways. So certainly there are some surface problems here, but this is not in the public rights of way. So this isn't something that we necessarily want to collect data on. So I'm not going to mark that, but it could present an accessibility barrier for those occupants there or their friends or family members. And again, we want to probably say can't see sidewalk here. And this would help the city understand that they might have to send out somebody to that area to actually do an on the ground walkability audit. Here we have another kind of pretty significant crack. So I put cracks and a height difference. And then we have a variety of tools. So you can like go to data and you could go to gallery and you could see different kinds of visualizations of the data that we've been collecting. So here we have like basically a gallery view of all the data that we've collected thus far in Chicago. And you can also agree and disagree with this. So you notice as I mouse over things. So if this is a missing sidewalk label. In fact, I would agree there is no sidewalk here. It just stops here and forces people onto the crosswalk. In contrast, I can click on this to increase the size. Well, it'll work. Looks like it's not loading, but that one I would have disagreed with because again, it doesn't appear to be on the pedestrian path. This pole definitely looks like it's a barrier. So you can zoom in. And so I would say agree. And then another kind of tool that's great is label map, which gives you that top-down visualization. And we're in a variety of different neighborhoods in Chicago. So you can zoom into these neighborhoods and just see the data is still loading, but there we go. So right now we were in the neighborhood of Harvey, which is in the southern part of Chicago. So yeah, any other questions? The very first mission you're given is like 250 feet. So oftentimes when we do like mapathons, we just have people start out and kind of ask questions as they're going, and they can share their screen if they have something that they don't know what to label or they're kind of confused about the tool. So here, I'm just going to keep going through Harvey. And again, here we have a pretty significant uplift. So I would mark this as a surface problem, probably as a 4, and say height difference.
Do you have regular mapathons?
We work with our community advocates generally to do that. So like with the Girl Scout troops, we did quite a few. It was nice. They were just coming out of the pandemic, so they were able to do, sort of, they did it at City Hall. All these laptops were together. They had pizza. They kind of did some learning, and I joined virtually, and then there was great Q&A, and we've had a couple of different mapathons like that. But because this tool is virtual, it was really nice during the pandemic and continues to be a really nice way to have like Zoom mapathons. So where so Columbus, Ohio is another place where we're at, and they do monthly mapathons. So that works pretty well.
I can see this being very useful during Citizen Science Month this year in April. Lots of libraries doing events and online programming.
So in the bottom, like right-hand corner, this is basically telling me where to go. So you want to follow the red path. That's a place that you haven't yet audited. Here's another, so I'm going to put uneven slanted for this as well as height difference.
Are all the cities, sorry, just a quick question about the data. So when a data set is perceived as done, does it continue to just go through validation over time? So these cities stay open in terms of like just
the only one that that's a great question. The only one we've closed off is DC, which was our first pilot site. And because the data was in a different format, that was like a very early version of our tool. But yeah, like we've just kept them open largely. So you can continue to do validation. The other thing is that, like, for example, in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see that this data was collected in July 2022. I mean, the image itself. So that means a Google Street View car drove down this road in July of 2022. And that's what I'm actually evaluating. And so they, in big cities like Chicago, they'll go once every 18 months or so. And so that's another opportunity for us to go back through and re-audit areas because the data refreshes.
Do you have any recent examples of like policy implications or where this has helped change either in Chicago or in any of the more completed data sets?
Yeah, I think the most exciting one maybe is what's happening in Oradell. So we can go over to Oradell. You can go click Chicago and then Oradell. So this is the one that's with Hackensack Meridian Medical School of Medicine and the Girl Scouts and the local chapter of the National MS Society. And they're preparing a presentation for their city council. The Girl Scouts are preparing a presentation for the city council in January, so the end of this month. And what's great about that is the Girl Scouts have been involved in this project from the very beginning. So in terms of like mapping and assessing all the sidewalks in their community, they pitched this to the Oradell City Council when they first started the project. And now they're going to come back to the city council. They've also engaged in the analysis, and they're going to present some of their findings. So I'm very excited about that, and we'll see what happens with the city council. And then the hope too is our partners want to grow Project Sidewalk out in New Jersey, so to other communities in need.
That's awesome. Oh, I can imagine excitement of the Girl Scouts too, being able to say all that data to city councils. They're the ones who impact a lot of your actual daily life. So that's really exciting to be able to be a part of that.
Yeah, yesterday we had the privilege of looking through their slide deck and like the script that they had written. And it was quite remarkable. And they have their names next to who's going to say what. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about it. But I think this is like, again, the ability to have community science projects around urban design is so powerful. And I have gotten emails from mothers and parents and Girl Scout troop leaders saying how it's transformed perspective. So these Girl Scout, like in their drive home from the Mapathon, they were saying like they were starting to look at the urban design of their communities and saying like, oh, that sidewalk's not accessible anymore. So I think that's very transformative to sort of the livelihoods and perspectives of these girls that'll carry forth throughout their lives.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm showing. If you remember, I mentioned that the purple is missing sidewalks and orange is surface problems. So this is Oradell behind me, that interactive map. So you can interact with the data yourself if you'd like, but you can definitely see there's a lot of different missing sidewalk segments here and a lot of different surface problems. Great. Other questions?
It's funny. You've given so much information. I have a feeling that a lot of us are like just kind of blown away of like, this is great. I don't know how else to like what the next question is, but if there are any, please shout them out. And if there are any later on when you receive the follow-up email too, if you have any like follow-up questions or you try it out on your own, feel free to send questions. We can get them passed along, or you can send the questions through SciStarter. Actually, we have a connect with the project leader function to do exactly that.
Oh, and I was going to show you that these contributions have changed. So I think I might actually have to refresh. So it said 79 contributions. So hopefully that'll have bumped up beyond 79. Yeah. So now it's that's a sum. That's a sum of the labels that you've added as well as the validations that you've done.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Thank you for clarifying that. Also, I did want to note, Roland did note in the chat, in case this impacts anyone at the moment, if you are on a mobile device, you can validate, so you can make the marks of like, I agree, I disagree, etc., labeled by other people, but on you can only do the labeling of what things are happening, or sorry, labeling the actual street or the pedestrian walkways on a desktop. But you can also do the validation as well. So if you're trying to figure out what's going on your phone while trying to participate, that might be what's going on.
Yeah, we would love to support iPads and iPhones and Android a little bit better, especially for schools. iPads are really common. We just don't have the UI and interactions just right yet, because as you're exploring, there's a lot of like click manipulations that you're doing on a traditional, desktop or laptop, and it's hard to translate that over to a touchscreen where you're like moving the interface and then actually adding in a label. So we're definitely working on that. So for now, the validations, and it's pretty fast. Like I said, on a mobile or on an iPad, you can do a lot of validations quickly. So the key there is just like maybe making sure that you're doing that correctly. I was going to bring up that you can also click on our like labeling guide, which basically kind of talks about urban design, borrows from a lot of the literature in the ADA and the US Access Board and the things that they publish about how we should design our cities. And then also tells you about like more about how to label things. So, and it does that for the primary label types.
In terms of using the iPads and tablets and such, honestly, for middle schoolers and people, youth in school, it might be it sounds like a good exercise to just get used to how things are labeled in general, to gain that kind of perspective of like what should be determined as a surface issue or a lack of sidewalk and whatnot. So, I mean, even so, using that validation tool specifically for schools is, I feel like it'd be pretty useful anyway. To be able to be on that specific action for a while. Yeah, in the future.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
I totally agree. I mean, it's, as you're engaged in validation, you're like literally learning about urban design as well. You're like, oh, I never really considered that a problem. I see why that was marked, right? And so it can help train you in as well. It's a great educational vehicle.
Yeah. All right, we are about 10 minutes out, so I'm going to, can I end your shared screen?
Sure, yeah, I'll hit stop there.
There we go, as I make a strange face into the screen for a moment. Awesome. This has been amazing. Okay, thank you so much for everything you've shared. I'm gonna jump us back to the other presentation briefly as we close out. But again, if there are any questions, you can still ask them. No limit to that. Go ahead and do that. Or if you have anything that comes up, you can send them back via the follow-up email and whatnot, or through the project page or the Project Sidewalk specifically. But I just wanted to note one more time, if you are looking for more ways or you're trying to plan for next week to be involved in the MLK Day of Service, SciStarter does share its database with the serve.gov and Points of Light Foundation, and you can find more opportunities there. This PowerPoint will be shared with you all, and I believe Roland will be able to drop the link in the chat again as well. He did drop it a little bit earlier too. But looking forward into the future, before we say goodbye to John and everyone else, we do have several events coming up. I just want to keep you aware. Next week we have Project Squirrel and the Squirrel Mapper coming to talk to us about spotting and reporting squirrels near you. I, being in Arizona, in not the foresty part, don't have any squirrels. And so every time I do it, if I'm in Phoenix or Tempe, I'm always like, 0, bummer. And then snow, many of you might be getting snow in the very near future if you've not already. And so we'll be talking snow by the end of the month, and Instant Wild, which is a wildlife camera essentially. And so we'll be looking at how to track those things, which is a little reminiscent of the validation techniques of Project Sidewalk, which is great. And then a quick reminder, and now that we've had this project specifically, it just gives me so many ideas for ways for people to get involved without having to really do a whole lot. It's really easy to just get started immediately, right? And Citizen Science Month is in April. It's the biggest push for participation in citizen science, and a big time to just all of us come together to really give our best effort to a lot of these research projects. And Project Sidewalk is an excellent one to involve in any group. Yeah, I'm sold. I don't know if that was a selling like talk or whatnot, but I'm sold. So I hope all of you are as well. And then lastly, as you are well aware of, if you are familiar with SciStarter already, or if you've been to one of these events before, we have a lot of resources for you. So anytime you have a question, just know we have opportunities to ask the community, ask the project leaders, ask us just personally, the info@scistarter.org. You can send messages to. We have a podcast, which actually has a special on John as well. So that'll be, or that's already available, I believe. And we have trainings, as I mentioned, and you can always find your next project on the project finder, scistarter.org/finder. If you ever have any questions or suggestions, we're happy to hear them. We would love to hear from you about any of these webinars if you'd like to hear about specific things. So that said, there is a survey. So if you have something to say to us about how we're doing or what you'd like to see, etc., that does help us out. So please fill out that survey that Roland will drop into the chat momentarily. Awesome. Okay. So that was a whole lot, and I ran through that. So we're a good 6 minutes early if there are any questions. Oh, I do see someone. Oh, thanks, Hillary. Yes. Just a quick thanks from Hillary. Yeah, if there are any questions, again, it's funny because it does feel like a big. This is a project where I don't think I've had this much information from the starting point, but it just really proves the point of like how well thought out and what active like things have already happened. So you can feel a lot more confident in participating in this one. I did try this project out before we even had this on the books for SciStarter Live, but it was really nice to go through the whole tutorial for things. So if anyone was looking at getting started in this, be aware, like it was super helpful. It trains you on everything. Similar almost to stall catchers, if you're familiar with the Alzheimer's research project, like they send you through a tutorial first, so you can just feel a lot more empowered and ready to do the project. So all those things said, I'm excited to continue to participate in this one. Roland, any last thoughts on anything that we talked about? Last questions?
Thank you. Thank you for the interesting presentation.
Oh, it was really my pleasure. I wanted to share our Slack too, just in case you wanted to, if you use Slack, you can join there and ask questions. People oftentimes will just like share screenshots of things and ask questions. So it's a great place to kind of debate and discuss urban design for access.
Excellent. Thank you. Patricia, are there specific locations? Oh, the locations are already like in the program. So when you go onto Project Sidewalk, it asks you to join a specific cities list. So when you join on, you'll be directed to a specific one. Yeah, actually.
I have
perfect.
Screen open in the background, but we're always looking for new communities. So since you joined late, like if there is a strong need for doing pedestrian mapping in your local neighborhood, and you're really interested in this, that's certainly, reach out to us. We also try to at least have some relationship with the local government so that they know that this is happening and there's like a use for the data. But you can see, if you just click on the city, so I'm in Chicago right now, so it's showing Chicago, but you can look at, we have up to 12 cities to choose from currently. Including 3 in Mexico and 2 in Europe. Thanks, Patricia, for your question.
If someone was to reach out about a specific city, is that through just your website info or your
CS. So this is all through the University of Washington, by the way. I'm a professor there. They could also email me at my private email, but it's probably better to do it through Sidewalk because there's research scientists and others on that can respond.
Awesome. I'm going to write that one down so that we know. We'll send that in the follow-up email as well. Excellent. All right, we're 3 minutes out, so I'm going to either end it early, but I did have a question, honestly, if anyone does want to stay on. I just was curious how you got involved in this specific sphere. Like you went from computer science to this specific applied version of comp sci. So I was curious what your pathway was to it, if you have a moment to tell us about that.
Yeah, I've long been really interested in applications of CS. I would say I almost dropped out of grad school because I was looking for areas where I could apply my technical skills to something with social value. So I had great conversations with a supportive advisor who was looking at kind of high value social domains to work on. And then as a professor, when I had more cycles to sort of create my own vision for things, this is actually a project idea that I had in grad school that I wasn't able to pursue. And then when I became a professor, it became sort of the backbone of a lot of my lab. So, combines a lot of our interests. And as I said, there's a lot of really interesting hardcore computer science problems here because we use your human labels to try to train computer vision algorithms to do some automated assessment. And, we're looking at bias there as well. So our long-term vision is to be able to evaluate any city within 24 hours.
Wow. That is an excellent goal. That would be amazing. Yeah. Wow. Are you using, or gosh, I'm trying to connect this because I feel like it's pretty similar to stall catchers in the way in which they're trying to train AI to be able to do this. They're doing machine learning after data sets. So once a data set is through, they use the continued validation and redo of a lot of data in order to train their machine learning. So is that a part of the process?
Yeah, that's what we've done so far. All of our experiments with machine learning are offline, so they're not actually implemented in Project Sidewalk yet, but there's lots of opportunities for it to do it in real time. So for example, the validation is a really important step. And so for curb ramp assessment, we actually have our automated algorithm working fairly good. It's like 90% accurate. So you can imagine for curb ramps, at least our AI algorithm could reduce human workload by trying to do some of that automatically. So, but it's
Right.
really interesting to look at that, like that nexus of how humans and machines can kind of work together. And ultimately, when we work with our cities, they currently trust humans more than they do the AI to do these analyses.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I mean, we have in Phoenix, we have those cars that are starting to be driverless
Yeah,
Uber or Lyft type scenarios that I think
it's
it's called
very
Waymo.
similar to that. Yep, it's very
Crazy.
similar to
Yeah.
that, but it's focuses on pedestrian networks rather than street networks for sure. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Oh, okay. I'm so glad we got to continue on
Yeah,
to
it was
that
really a pleasure to be
conversation.
here. Thank you so much for hosting me. And please, anyone reach out to those emails if you'd like to discuss things further.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. It's
Thank you.
been a great time. I'm
You're
going to
all
go ahead and pause. Oh, he just dropped off. I'm going to go ahead and stop the live stream. Bye, Facebook. And then, John, if you wouldn't mind sticking around for 2 seconds, I'm going to go
Sure.
ahead and stop recording.